Hello and namaste. This is the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, hosting another segment of the Almost Daily ZenCast. Just one in a series of various segments of this podcast project. During the ZenCast segments, I'm going to focus on weaving together all the different pieces of the puzzle and try to bring my my crazy Zen knowledge, which you can acquire for yourself too, my friends. I'm not special. I'm not more important than anyone else. I do not claim to be a guru, and I am not charging or trying to profiteer on my hobbies here. I am trying to crowdfund, very casually, I haven't even really made a big effort yet, the project so that it can maybe turn into a better, more professional version of itself. And there's a vision there for that, but I digress. Thank you for tuning in. This podcast is focused on bringing a Zen or transcendental, both of those terms I use bunny ear quotes around, air quotes. But to bring that kind of point of view to the national discussion of current events, news, politics, and pop culture. By the way, as always, I want to give a big shout out of gratitude to freemusicarchive.org. Forgive me if I've ever butchered your name in the past. But the theme music for this segment is called Skipping in the No Standing Zone by a gentleman named Peter Gresser. I hope I didn't butcher your last name. It's one of those names I'm not sure how to pronounce. The link for the song, if you found it catchy, is on this little podcast show's profile page on Sprecher.com. And I think that's all the quote-unquote business I have to do to get the show started. For those like 2 or 3 of you that are hardcore listeners and have been paying attention, I want to apologize for the last couple of days worth of episodes. I was just venting and rambling. But I think that's what the Trumptopia segment is for. To sort of speak at a more Trumptopian level of sort of interconnected word association, that applies to the general madness. Because obviously there's a need for that. There's an appeal to just speaking that way. Here on the ZenCast, I'm going to try to bring a little bit more focused perspective and a little bit more practical, applicable content. I want to remind or introduce a notion to listeners who may have not caught this in a previous episode. I was giving some shout out and love to a much more famous spiritual personality than myself. Not that it's a contest or anything. It's not. But there's a wonderful human being out there in the world that if you haven't come across them, you may not agree with everything, obviously, but as a public speaker and as a spiritual person, I find a lot of his statements that I've had the pleasure of hearing in the mix of public discourse to be intelligent, cogent, well thought out, deeply rooted in a sort of clarity of understanding about spiritual teachings. And that's Cornel West. Not to trump him up. Like, we're all human beings, we're each on our own path, etc., etc. Sidebar, isn't it a horrible shame? And this is more of a Trumptopia thing, but now that Trump is President Trump, it's sort of sullied the use of, it's kind of ruined the phrase Trump. Not referring to him as a person, but as an action. The phrase for, I trump you, my hand of cards trumps your hand of cards. Or, my idea trumps yours. It's sort of just dirtied it. I don't want to use it anymore. I just did, and I went, whoa, whoa. Why did I bring that up? We all have minds, right? And the mind always chatters. And one of the most fundamental primary questions that I've been asked, or that I've witnessed being asked of others, and that I've been recounted by those who teach, is, I can never silence the chatter in my mind. I can't do meditation because I can't stop the chatter in my brain. And we'll address that, because people cling to that, and that's sort of one of the first and strongest barriers to even engaging in a discussion about meditation. Today's episode is titled #Meditation Matters, because, it took a long time for that idea to germinate. I can't believe I didn't bust that out as soon as the black lives, blue lives, white lives, all lives, different colored lives mattered argument cropped up. Maybe I just had to let it get played out on its own and not get, #meditation matters would have gotten drowned out and laughed off the stage at the time. But let's take that instance for a hot second. Hashtags become movements. That's my coffee maker. If you can hear that, I'm not sure. It might not be coming through on the recording, but thank you, coffee maker. Hashtags become movements in this day and age, and either that's something that's just trending right now, and it'll eventually become passé, and it'll people won't want to make the work, put in the effort, or ideas will just get too burnt out too fast, or that'll continue to happen. So let's take a look at black lives, blue lives, white lives, all lives. That's become a social argument or debate or a fight that divides people. Now, there's naturally going to be a group of people that don't want to have anything to do with it at all. Just like there's people who just don't bother fucking voting. And that's fine. I have a very nuanced and sophisticated point of view on voting, and I don't think it's a yes or no, black or white issue of vote, don't vote. But I digress back to this example. One could argue, and it is my argument, I humbly propose this to the public, spectrum of discourse and analysis of our society. One could argue that our society, in large part, operates on a divide and conquer, us versus them, brainwashing sort of mechanism. Whoa, that's crazy sounding, right? Wow. Some of you who are maybe, if not hardcore listeners of the sort of on again, off again podcast, but old time Facebook friends who still, who remember the sort of crazy collection of memes that I generate and or repost and stuff. This is an anchor of my worldview. I'm convinced after 20 plus years worth of paying attention to the news, to the things not in the news, to real life experiences, to facts and figures, to data and trends, and spending my time slogging through all the conspiracy theories and all the the normative sort of in the middle theories about history and whatnot. You don't like I said yesterday, you don't need a formula more complicated than greed plus profiteering on whatever. Insert war, insert healthcare, insert, people dying. They profiteer on our deaths, man. They profiteer on our births. They profiteer on our illnesses in between. They profiteer on all of our life events. We've turned everything into profiteering. Whether it's sort of normative profit motive in competitive free market economy, or large super mega corporations that are just sucking people dry, or religious institutions that are sucking communities dry. And so to keep us from going, hey, hang on a minute, as some occasionally, slightly awake and or enlightened ones may have done so in the past, hey, we're doing this all wrong, folks. Again, not claiming to be enlightened, just think this sort of all makes sense once you step back and take a big picture look. Whether you believe in previous enlightened beings of whatever rationale or style or taste or cultural origin, or not, whether you're religious or not, one can make the the sincere intellectual argument that we live in a society where some of us should stand up and say, hey, everybody, what the fuck? We're doing this all wrong. And anybody that takes a real good, clear, hard look will probably come to very similar conclusions. And that's that in order to keep this whole clusterfuck of shenanigans going, and everyone's sort of docile and complacent about it, almost every social norm somehow in it includes some compartmentalization, and which is dividing, right? Part of the divide and conquer. Some compartmentalization, some identity politics to attach you to a group or a subset of groups or a whatever, and a conviction that there are others out there that are diametrically opposed to you and you must fight. And it's in our language, man. It's in our cultural, signposts. We have to fight for our rights. And there's this, and yet we live in the land of the free, or we believe in freedom. We got to fight for freedom. Aren't we born free? So back to hashtags. Let's just isolate. Let's let the hashtag arguments represent all of the crazy lines of division. What is the purpose there? Well, people put a lot of energy and passion and focus and time and effort into thinking and acting out their reasoning behind why it is important to attach oneself, or support is the code we use for it. To attach oneself is to support or to believe in. Believe is a bastardized word. I think I've talked about it before. In short, believe, according to some readings that I've done, used to mean to actively be engaged in compassionate loving of a person or an identity. Not to mindlessly accept their statements as unquestionably true all the time. So, language gets dumbed down and manipulated. So, but to believe in something is to lend it your support, and it's to lend it your blind faith, and it's to lend it your belief with all caps. Now, whether you're spiritual or not, whether you're religious or not, all human beings, in one way or another, however they rationalize it or, frame it for themselves in their minds, they use the mechanisms, because belief is a tool or a tool set in our not negative like crazy psycho, but like psychological shortened, spiritual, our psychological, spiritual, energetic, and material, toolboxes. And when we are dumping all this focus and energy and concentration and, essentially guiding our consciousness which is what this whole ride is about, is comprehending the relationship between that which we think we are, that which is our consciousness, and what the fuck is really going on here. It's like that zoomed way far out there, right? But I think I've outlined before, but I want to sort of like touchstone it right here. According to what I would describe as a theory, a meta theory of several theories, made up of constituent theories that converge, and sort of trying to eliminate out the static and the noise due to cultural stuff, due to corruption, due to sort of manipulation, and because that happens to all religious or spiritual institutions once they become institutions. Okay. You don't have to believe in God the way God is defined, or what a prophet is, the way it's culturally normatively defined by sort of postmodern Judeo-Christian religious thinking, to sort of wrap your brain around the notion that the human phenomena is broader than that which we've been allowed to comprehend. And one of the ways in which they keep us ignorant is to give us really seductive reasons to go running down negative or vicious spiral ego trap rabbit holes. Right? And I'm going to humbly suggest, without offending people who are deeply attached to any of the movements that I'm inferring to or referencing, vis-a-vis using the symbolism of there's a hashtag for Black Lives Matter, and a hashtag for White Lives Matter, and a hashtag for Police Lives Matter, and a hashtag for Everybody Lives Matter, and people are teaming up like it's a sport or a contest or a war, going at it intellectually, which once you start arguing intellectually, whether you're doing it online or you're doing it on a talk show or you're doing it by just watching someone on a TV show or listening to where people are arguing those ideologies, you're engaging in the mental process of fighting ideas. Okay. Here's why or how I humbly submit to you that hashtag meditation matters can heal the hashtag war problem as symbol for all conflict, because this is a symbol for the entire multiplex of division polemics that they use against us, because they divide us, Christian versus Jew versus Muslim, the trifecta, the world's one of the world's oldest manipulation techniques. If you're a longtime Instagram or Facebook follower, you probably remember that I've posted many times that all three of the postmodern organized religious institutions, as they operate today, are basically hijacked to some degree or another in order to, not fully outright completely controlled. There's still lots of good people trying to do good work because they believe in the teachings as they are contained in the book as that we know them today. And I have a whole theory on that, but bottom line is there are infiltrating external money-driven influence negative actors, influencing basically spies that are hijacking a portion of each of those audiences and each of those structures, socially speaking, in order to pit them against each other. Debunk that for me, please. Look around the world. It's patently obvious, right? Okay. But I'm not trying to offend anybody. All right. Let me get down to the real meat and bones and heart of the matter. This is what they do. They do it along class lines. They do it along race lines. Who is they? Those that are profiteering at every instance possible. How can meditation solve that? Is one of the next big, top 5 or really top 3 biggest questions of doubt, which I submit to you humbly. And I don't mean to offend anyone who's ever thought this or asked this of anyone else or around me, but that's programming. That's programming that's been around for a really long time. There's a very strong argument, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, that there's programming designed to get us to have a knee-jerk response to sort of categorically reject anything hocus-pocusy, anything magical, anything outside of the Judeo-Christian, agnostic, atheist, normative, postmodern sort of collection of things you can believe in already. And throwing out a very important baby that's floating in that bathwater, which is ourselves. If you take a moment to pause and really think about what this collection of programmings kind of can generate in a person, we're conditioned to live in a more in a fear-based mentality, which is not just mental activity, my friends, because even though you may or may not agree that this is emergent science that's being verified, but when you have a thought, and whether that thought is a sexy thought or a negative self-critical thought or a fear-based thought or a hate thought, that thought also either arises simultaneously with an energy or maybe arguably was the thinking, the sentence making was a reaction to the energy. Which came first, the energy of the thought? That's a tricky question, and it boils down to we can't really perceive our own bodies and our own energetic structures clearly and accurately enough at this time to get a clear answer. But it's also sort of meaningless. It's as silly as the chicken and the egg question because they're interconnected. We are always experiencing energy frequencies. That cannot be denied. Now, mind you, there's a whole segment of the world that's bought into the argument that there is no such thing as that. They're, the strict Newtonian materialists that think energy only exists in very simple and delineated ways like electricity. And they don't think that our bodies are simultaneously generating multiple bandwidths of energy and different frequency layers. But that's an easy one to overcome. And I encourage anyone who still thinks that way, that thinks what we're pointing to, or anyone like me who thinks this way might be a little bit cuckoo, to just go do a little bit of research and a little bit of personal experimentation. It might take a while, because don't forget, theoretically speaking, all of society for a very long time has been about pushing us and coaching us and conditioning us and discouraging us away from an innate understanding of how our actual organic bodies really work on the sort of including the invisible layers that we generally take for granted or dismiss as hocus pocus. And they cajole us into that by also feeding us a bunch of lies which are easily disproved, so then we get cynical and we sit around arguing about stuff. And that's a dumb example, right? Like, Santa Claus doesn't exist. Sorry, folks. Sorry to ruin it if you're listening to this and you got kids in the car or whatnot. The Easter Bunny doesn't exist. But there's a reason why those things are symbols. And so, they then make a big leap and go, oh, chakras don't exist. You can't really find them or see them. But, a fictional character is much, much different than a subtle energy, organic structure that we are unclear of how to measure with technology yet. And, mind you, as early as 1995 or 96, I personally spoke to a traditional Chinese medicine, alternative medicine doctor who also simultaneously was like a high-end PhD in like neurobiological science or something like that, something in the neurobiology, physiology area, like a very impressive, studied it hard, paid a lot of money to get his PhD here in America, who showed me real, genuine magnetic resonance images that he had created using an experimental technique, using, existing technology that was sort of tuning in to a finer granularity of it's like, like before we invented HD, we could never imagine movies and TV shows looking so crisp that we could see everybody's fucking pores and the germs growing inside them, right? But nowadays, if you don't believe me, you've never owned an HD TV, go walk into a Best Buy. Huh? Go walk into a Target. No, Target doesn't have them. Well, some of them, maybe they do. Go walk into a store that has the newest, latest HD stuff, and they got a sample playing. And think about how 20 years ago that was just impossible. We could not imagine. 30 years ago, we could not imagine. When we invented DVDs, we thought that was the most amazing clarity we ever achieved in movies. Don't let me go down that rabbit hole rant, because I think that there's something lost. There's something beautiful and majestic about actual film. But I digress. So think about this. Back then, this is when I was in college. I was at UC, University of California, Irvine. And no matter what you think of college, no matter what you think of, especially state-owned and funded science, this was a place that, to me and to my critical thinking mind, because I'm a little kooky, and I started doing my questioning as early as like 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, was when I was rejecting societal norms, okay? So I was ahead of the curve in college. I was not, I'm trying to be humble here, I'm not an asshole. I was also sort of very naive and ignorant about a lot of stuff. But this guy hit me as very real and true. And he was verifying that when acupuncture needles are correctly placed and correctly manipulated, there are electromagnetic activation of flow. That's the best way I could describe it. All right? Now, that isn't hardcore proof because I don't have the pictures, I don't have the links. And this is 1995, 96, so it's before some of you guys listening were even born. But there was literally a doctor who had grown up, as a kid in China and been heavily influenced because his family members had, lots of experience or whatnot in Chinese traditional medicine and in particularly acupuncture and some of the herbal stuff, who came over here and was like trying to bring science and that together. And that's easily laughed off as such a bunch of new age mumbo jumbo, hippie new age woo woo nonsense. But think about that. Why would there be a cultural movement to divide us along those lines if that shit is real? To keep it on the edges and the fringe and rejectable by the mainstream. Because if that shit is real, imagine what we could do, what we could achieve. So how can this symbol operate? So these hashtags are fighting, right? Unless say meditation is real. Let's not get into trying to figure out all the nuances of defining it right now. Let's just say meditation is real. Is that a crazy assumption to make? Is that too far of a leap to take? I don't know. You decide. Think about it. Or as I often humbly suggest in real life and in my real life social media, and I will forever here on this project, is take the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's 9-month challenge. It's the 999 challenge. I don't know. I don't know if there's any numerology fucking weirdness, but I don't believe in numerology outright. I also know, but I do believe in sacred geometry. So numbers have weird concurrence. But there's no reason to believe. Okay, we got to get back to belief, right? Because all of these polemics that they get us to believe in things, and then they've also created a belief structure that's diametrically opposed to it that they get other people to believe in. I'm getting excited and a little bit squirrely here. Let me focus. We'll talk at length in other segments and in other times about how to meditate, how meditation works, what part of it is hocus pocus nonsense that might be cultural baggage or translation crazy, and what parts of it are simple, pragmatic. You don't need to accept any belief structures about God or whatever to just experience the benefits, right? And also, there's high order shit too, which I personally have achieved a level of acceptance about. And we'll explore that deeply. But in the most simplest pragmatic terms, meditation is about the liberation of one's mind from ideological constructs that pit us against each other. Why? If we just think about it in purely materialist terms, purely, Freudian psychological terms, if we were all free of the bullshit, I know that sounds like a harsh, hateful term, but I mean things that are just misleading and not true. And if there are things designed to keep us arguing and fighting, and we weren't clinging to those, then we wouldn't be arguing and fighting. And if we aren't arguing and fighting, then our minds would be clear, our perceptions would be clear in order to collaborate instead, in order to unify around our community's problems and solve our problems from a local sort of like in my home, on my block, in my neighborhood, in my city, in my state, in my country, in my world kind of perspective, without the interference of I've got to fight you because you're a Democrat, or I've got to fight you because you're an anarchist and I don't believe in anarchy. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Belief manifests, okay? And even materialists can accept that there's a way that sentence is true. Never mind the non-materialist methods or ways in which belief might manifest in a living, organic, fractal universe that is in fact a sort of incubator for the consciousness that we call God. In a purely materialist, so just never mind that, it's too crazy, right? Never mind that. In a purely materialist sense, you have a brain with multiple functioning parts, right? And that mind has an ego, and that ego, and its other, competing sort of parts, the id and the superego and the lizard mind and all those other layers that are operating purely just as a emergent phenomena, the spongy tissue in our skull. They operate in diametric opposites and sort of create conflict inside our minds because of the conditioning. They respond to the conditioning. Okay? And belief alters the way we rationalize things in our mind to the extent that if, and as we know this from purely normative sort of examples in real life, you probably know someone like this in person. You probably have heard of someone like this. We know that there's like a mental disorder of being a pathological liar. Pathological liars, however it works for them inside their head, refuse to see that which they've chosen to pathologically lie out of existence. And refuse to admit that which is not real, which they've chosen to pathologically lie into existence. However crazy it may sound to you, if you've ever dealt with a pathological liar, it's almost impossible to know whether they understand or not that they're weaving a lie and that they're choosing to believe in it, right? But you can perceive that about them and understand, wrap your brain around it. I don't know if any pathological liars are listening, but deep down, I suspect somewhere part of them knows. No offense, guys. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings here, of anything that I say, ever. And I'm also not trying to say that I know more about you, but I do think some things are pretty clear, and that's that if, like I said again, even at a purely psychological Freudian place, in a biological place, if we liberated ourselves from a need to identify with being a Republican or a Democrat, an extremist or a moderate, all the labels, all the lines of division, all the polemics, and as meditation encourages us to do, just accepted ourselves as we are, as organic living beings, and allowed that truth, because that can't be debunked. You are alive, right? You're listening to my voice. Your ears work. Your brain works. You can meditate. Any thought in your mind that says, no, I can't meditate, is a lie. Because everyone's capable of lying. Everyone is capable of lying to others and to themselves, no matter what they think or believe about their lying. Because belief, I know I just said belief manifests, but belief works in an inverse, weird, trippy, two-way street kind of way. Many scientists have said this before. True phenomenological fact remains a true phenomenological fact no matter what you believe about it. Right? But that's a sort of one-way, a one-dimensional look at the world, because the world doesn't work one-dimensionally. It works multidimensionally. A true fact remains a true fact. A tree growing in a forest in the corner of the woods somewhere in a spot on the world where no human being has ever set foot, because there's got to still be at least one place like that on this mother planet, this mother womb. I pray that is so. And that tree exists. There's a tree there. There's lots of trees and plants and bugs, and they're all there whether we believe it or not, whether we think about it or not. Simultaneously, I may add to your awareness, if you haven't heard of this before either, I think that the two axioms of belief exist. In your phenomenological experience, inside the bubble of your own universe, because you only know that which you perceive and that which you comprehend about your perceptions. When you believe something very strongly, that acts as a filter in the processing of the data as it comes in. So as words and images and sounds and sensations come in through your apparatus from the plain old boring mundane materialist world, your belief structures interrupt that process and alter and adjust. That's why people can fabricate memories. That's how people can experience deep pain and or injury because they believe that they've been injured, or they believe that all those kinds of things. Now add to that all the spiritual things, because I'm not trying to reject those. I'm just saying you can see how this would function even at a purely materialist, statist place. When you meditate, you can achieve a kind of intellectual healing. Never mind body healing and spiritual healing if you reject believing in those at this time. But you can achieve a sort of intellectual healing, because if you stop clinging to beliefs about what you think you are, that which you actually are reveals itself to you. That is a little bit scary about meditation, because most of us live under a sort of complex web of lies about that which we should believe that we are. And there's a bunch of different shades of gray on that. We either believe in some flavor of the Christian doctrine of God made us and we are his subjects and or slaves and or whatever, etc. There's as many iterations of a sort of close but not quite right to outright crazy wrong ideological construct of things that people believe that we are. But here's the crazy thing that I think is undebunkable. You can either cling to an idea about what is going on, or what the universe is, or what this cup is, or you can have a direct phenomenological experience. Which do you think is going to be more accurate? Which do you think is going to be more true? Which do you think is going to be more helpful? Which do you think is going to be more healing? Which do you think is going to be more fruitful and positive and render results that actually help us get somewhere? Someone recently asked me on social media, and I hope they forgive me because I'm referencing this early. I hadn't really gotten a response, but I asked them for permission to generally reference their question. I have many social media profiles on a bunch of different sites, and on one of them, someone asked me, so you're big on meditation and you're against politics somehow, I think. Am I accurate? You're sort of against all politics, but not really against the logistics of politics, just the ideology of politics. So what kind of government would you have? That was one of the best questions anyone's ever asked me. And honestly, the kind of government I think we all should have is one in which everyone involved learned an honest, genuine, clean, neutral, unbiased meditation practice. There are plenty of meditation practice that do not dictate doctrine. They just help you discover yourself. If everyone does that, like there's a saying, I forget, it's been attributed to a couple of different people, and I forget currently who's the most accurate. And I'm sure it's been said different ways. But if we just taught every kid meditation, simple, genuine, clear, honest, non-doctrine-oriented, ego-freeing, ideologically liberating meditation, that's the kind of government I want. Where everybody in office has naturally, organically wanted to meditate their whole lives. Or most of them, at least. Not because it was imposed through some sort of oppressive legislation. Not because it was mandated. But because we all got on board organically. The way we can all get on board organically. I've talked about it before. If you haven't heard me talk about it, you can go listen to the guy I referenced, a gentleman by the name of Moji, who does claim to be a guru. So he's an authority of much higher, technical knowledge in theory than I might be. But he's, there's the bathtub analogy, and I forget which video it's in, but he has one. And there's a bathtub analogy about, the bathtub is the universe, the porcelain is the material world, the water is the spiritual world, and the drain is the process of enlightenment and, transcendence into whatever the next level is. Now, there's many steps in between, which is what the whirlpool is, and us swimming towards the whirlpool, etc. But so there's this back to my. I'm trying to build an analogy because I think it makes really simple logic. We can all be busy arguing about which other hashtag matters, or we can join team hashtag meditation matters, because meditation doesn't care in a healthy, positive way what religion you are, what race you are, what gender you are. Meditation is your birth, as a process, as a practice, because it is not an indoctrination thing. Meditation is organic to every human being. Debunk that question. Debunk that statement if you can. I'm going to be back with another segment to elaborate deeper and point to some very simple practices, and maybe do a quick and short guided meditation on part 2 of today's podcast. So thank you for joining me. This has been part 1 of the Almost Daily ZenCast show. Please join me for part 2, where I'm going to try to focus a little bit more practical and pragmatic, and try to actually address the issue of what the fuck is meditation. And hopefully bring some closure to my analogy about the hashtag wars and team hashtag meditation matters. And to wrap up the segment, got to do a little bit of shameless self-promotion, because even a postmodern mystic's got to keep up his hustle, right? I genuinely, humbly, and earnestly would love to make this collection of projects, the podcast shows, the transcendental science fiction and action adventure book series that I'm slowly grinding out. I'd like to make that my art job, and you can help make that a reality by helping me crowdfund it, crowdsource it. I'm never going to charge until I get a book published or something, or I make turn the podcast into some kind of CD or something maybe. But you get where I'm going. You can help me out by giving me a tip or an honest donation. Pay what you can. Keep the YouTube and the Sprecher and the thing as ad-free as I can manage to keep it. And I never want to charge a subscription, although I guess you can. I'm going to revamp my Patreon, but I've got a Patreon, which I guess just did a massive update, so I got to go tune into that myself. But you can also just give, if you can, I can barely afford to give donations to other causes and stuff.